magnetize your minis, flight stands, custom kits, and all the hobby supplies you'll need from themagnetbaron.com.
Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel for Craft World, Aeldari.com. I'm Brent, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the big battle focus reveal on the Warhammer community page yesterday, on which GW dropped an article explaining how the new Aeldari faction power will work. If you have been living under a Wraithbone rock, you may not know that Fate dice, Strands of Fate, is no longer going to be the Aeldari faction-wide power when our codex drops in 2 weeks, but instead it will be a detachment ability for the Seer Council detachment, which is going to be presumably the Ulthwé-esque detachment, and instead Battle Focus is back, kind of, but not really. So Battle Focus is the name of the Aeldari faction-wide ability that Space Elves have had in earlier versions of the game, and content creators all over the interwebs pontificated and prognosticated and theorized about what it would be, and we were all wrong, which is just so fabulous, because what it turns out Battle Focus actually is in 10th edition is so much more nuanced and so much more interesting and so much more sophisticated than it ever has been before, that it has restored to Aeldari a level of complexity and a playstyle dependent on synergistic forward planning that has been the thing that has made Eldar fun to play in earlier editions of the game, and was sort of conspicuously absent in 10th edition, where the Fate Dice ability was sort of point and click, and the psychic powers somewhat marginalized, such that Space Elves, this is really my only complaint about Space Elves in 10th edition, they just didn't have that high skill cap symphony of power when you play them just right, and tragic disaster when you make any mistake vibe that they've had in other editions that has sort of been their hallmark and has made them so fun to play. Kind of like playing Blue and Magic in 1999, where if you do it right, your opponent shakes his fist at the sky and is like, "Curse you, Space Elves, how can you be so clever?" And if you make any little mistake, the whole thing comes crashing down, and you're like a supervillain seeing your plan thwarted, which is fun. And I think the current edition has restored that with the introduction of the new version of Battle Focus. So let's talk about what it is. Here's how Battle Focus will work in 2 weeks when the Codex drops. So if you are playing a 2,000 point game, you as an Aeldari player at the beginning of each battle round will get 4 Battle Focus tokens. At the 1,000 point level, you will get 2 tokens. At the 3,000 or more point level, you will get 6. But in 2,000 point games, most tournament games, you'll get 4. And at the end of each battle round, any unspent tokens you will simply lose, and you will get 4 again at the beginning of the next battle round. So you will always have 4 of these things, and each of them can be used to fuel one of 6 agile maneuver powers. Agile maneuvers are essentially stratagems that use a different resource to fuel them. They don't use command points, they use battle focus points. So as an Aeldari player, essentially what you end up with is like access to one set of stratagems for your detachment and the main stratagems that anyone can use in the game with your command points, and then another set of stratagems with your battle focus points, which are all movement based. All of the battle focused abilities in some way involve manipulating movement, representing the fact that Space Elves are incredibly maneuverable and squirrely and tricksy. You can use any number of these tokens in any battle round, but an individual unit can only use 1 token per phase, and you may not use these. There are 6 of these. You may not use the same one twice in the same turn. So they are, in fact, very much like stratagems. And this is cool because it means as an Eldar player, you have this tremendous flexibility, but you also have a lot more to keep track of. And that is, I think, what it should be like to play Eldar. Okay, let's look at the first one. The first one is star engines. You may remember that in previous editions of the game, there's been a star engine enhancement, and this is where star engines is gone. It's an agile maneuver now. So this one can only be used on units that have the vehicle keyword, And what it does, you trigger it in the movement phase when you declare that your vehicle is making a move. You must declare that your vehicle is making a normal move, and you add d6 plus 1 to that normal move. So it's a normal move that's even a little bit faster than an advanced move. I see 3 possible significant advantages to this, or ways to use this. The first, of course, the sort of most obvious one, is that vehicles that have weapons that do not have the assault keyword can make essentially an advanced plus 1 move and still shoot with their not assault weapons, with all of their weapons. That's great. You might have to do that sometimes to get a bead on the enemy units that you would most like to target. That's great. Or maybe your goal is not to get a bead that you couldn't get, but just to get the vehicle into cover more like reliably in the midfield, right? Eldar vehicles are fast, but the movement penalty you take for pivoting is such that getting them out from behind the scenery that they were hiding behind and also making the pivot move can make it like difficult to get exactly where you want to be in the midfield. And I feel like this makes it possible, so you can hide from most of your opponent's units but still shoot the thing you want to shoot. But that's not all. The ability to move d6 plus 1 and simply make a normal move makes it possible for small, inexpensive vehicles. I'm thinking Vipers, because who knows if Hornets will even still exist when the Codex drops. Most Forge World stuff seems to be going to Legends. But a Viper potentially could move into some place on the table where it needs to make to do an action, right? To score you secondary objective points. Because you're just making a normal move, right? You can still do an action. In 10th edition, having the assault keyword is not sufficient to, you can't advance and do an action just because you have the assault keyword. It specifically says, right, that in currently the Pariah Nexus rules, and it said it in the Leviathan rules, all of the mission decks where you're playing secondary missions have this clause that you can't do an action if you advanced, and vectored engines are a way around that. And then lastly, because it's a normal move, of course, you could still charge. And so you could, for example, basically advance, make a normal move with a Viper that's like adds d6 plus 1, which is pretty freaking far. I think it's like 16 to 21 inches. And then shoot something with the Viper's loadout and charge some enemy tank. Now, Aeldari don't have any vehicles that are melee threats, but sometimes just bumping into something to block its movement and to make it choose between falling back or taking -1 to hit with its weapons, it's really good with a relatively cheap disposable vehicle like a Viper. So I think Vectored Engines is really solid. I think that it's going to create some fun, clever play opportunities. I don't think it's one of the very best, but I think it's good. I also think it makes Armored Warhost even less appealing than it already was, because like all Aeldari will just kind of be able to do one of the things that was theoretically best about Armored Warhost, just by virtue of being Aeldari. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, the second one's fabulous. It's just fabulous, and I think it's going to fundamentally change the way we think about playing Aeldari. I think this is going to be a go-to tool that most of us will use at least once, probably multiple times in every single game that we play. And it's called Spliffing Shadows. And what it does is it makes one of your units invulnerable to Overwatch fire. And the way that it works is that when you either select a unit to make a normal, advance, or fallback move, or set it up on the table because it's coming out of reserve or it's coming out of deep strike, or when it declares a charge, you use Spliffing Shadows, and it simply can't be targeted for the whole turn. And that whole turn thing is important because it means that if you use Spliffing Shadows in the movement phase, you're safe from Overwatch also in the charge phase. There are several units that are simply obviously huge beneficiaries. Obviously, the first ones I think of are my favorite aspect warriors, Howling Banshees. Howling Banshees are pretty solid at 70 points. They're pretty good at 70 points, but they're not amazing, but they're so close to being really good in 10th edition. And I think the ability to shut down Overwatch potentially could get them there. In other editions of the game, the Howling Banshee Mask has just kind of like shut down Overwatch. And now we've got a way to do it. Every single turn, there are only 6 of these powers. You have 4 tokens to spend. I think you're gonna pick this one a lot with one of your 4 tokens, every single turn you can make one of your units just immune to Overwatch. And theoretically, you can make one immune in the movement phase and another immune in the charge phase. But in general, I think you're only going to use this once. Banshees have really good AP. They have okay strength, but coming out of something like a Falcon that lets them reroll a wound roll, really they have very good strength. But they're fragile. They're incredibly vulnerable to anything with pretty good Overwatch. They're T3 bodies with a 4-up save against shooting. And so the ability to just shut that down is pretty fantastic. This is also going to be really effective for the Solitaire, which is fragile, a fragile T3 body with only 3 wounds that can be a powerful trading unit. And also just Harlequin players. Harlequin players do not like Overwatch, and so the ability to shut it down, really good. Other units that will benefit, Fire Dragons. Fire Dragons have to come out of a tank or the webway or whatever within line of sight of the tank or monster that they want to shoot, and lots of tanks and monsters have pretty good Overwatch capability against aspect warriors, so the ability to just say, no, you will not shoot my Fire Dragons is pretty good. We don't know what the detachments will look like, but if we have some detachment that makes closer than 9-inch deep strikes possible, this will be even better. But Howling Banshees who can advance and charge already have an incredibly long threat range. So this is just really solid. Also, we've been told that some units will have an ability on their data card that lets them use particular agile maneuvers for free without preventing another unit from using that same agile maneuver. And it is certainly plausible that Howling Banshees will have an ability on their data card letting them use Spliffing Shadows for free, because the Banshee Mask has worked that way in previous editions. It would not surprise me at all. Okay, the next one of these abilities is called Fade Back. This is maybe the best one. It's really good. It triggers in your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has shot, and you pick a unit from your army that has been shot. The only thing you cannot choose is a Titanic unit, so like a Wraith Knight. You choose a unit that's been shot, and it can make a normal move of D6 plus 1 inches. There are so many possible uses for this. Also, we've been told that Guardians, the new ability for at least Guardian Defenders, and we're told that other units have this too, so maybe Storm Guardians have it too, maybe other things have it too, but Guardian Defenders can just do this for free, and Guardian Defenders using this ability does not prevent you from using it in the same phase on other units. The ability to make a move of D6 plus 1 after you've been shot by an enemy unit is it's so strong. Here are things you can do with this. One of your units that you want it to live, right? It's an infantry unit. You line it up you move it into a ruin. It gets shot by an enemy unit, and you just move it through the wall of a ruin or around the edge of a ruin, so it's not further targetable. Guardian Defenders with their 10 elf bodies and their platform, which adds additional wounds to the squad, the whole squad has a 3-up save and cover. It is actually relatively annoying to try to remove with a single volley of shooting fire. I'm sorry, shooting fire, that's redundant. A single volley of fire. They do die pretty easily in melee, but it's pretty tough to kill Guardians with a single volley unless you overkill them, unless you shoot them with something so good and powerful that it shouldn't be shooting Guardians. And so the ability to have your Guardians move into some place on the board to perform an action, to get shot by something but then become invisible, or to move forward with them, and it's like, well, you could shoot my Guardians, but if you do, they're going to move even further onto that objective, and then I'll score it on my turn. Or some really powerful melee unit like the Avatar of Cain, or a large unit of melee wraiths. It's like, well, you could shoot my melee wraiths from my Avatar of Cain, but do you really want to give them D6 plus 1 more movement towards you, so they're going to charge you next turn? Or some vehicle or something gets, pinged by something and then ducks behind a ruin or whatever. This is, if you are clever and thoughtful with this could potentially be so powerful and so annoying for an opponent to play into. And initially I was thinking to myself, like, I bet when they wrote these rules, in the first iteration of the rules, you got to trigger it when your opponent declared targets, not after they'd inflicted damage. But then maybe they chickened out when Aeldari were like so OP out of the gate at the beginning of 10th edition that they just don't want to risk it happening again after the Codex. But I don't know. I think the fact that this doesn't trigger until your opponent has inflicted damage once prevents playing into Eldar from being just a hugely feel-bad experience for less experienced players, but gives experienced players, nevertheless, an incredibly powerful tool for janky movement shenanigans that can make it difficult for an opponent to wipe out a unit or make it easy for you to advance your like ultra powerful melee units up the board even faster, or to jump onto objectives to score them or strip them from an opponent, or just like whatever. It's really good. Okay, this next one is pretty simple and straightforward. It's called Swift as the Wind, and all it does is give you an additional 2 inches of movement with one of your units, regardless of whether they're making a normal move, an advanced move, or a fallback move. You just get to be extra fast. I strongly suspect that because we have 4 of these things, this is frequently going to be something that we do just because why not? And it's going to be a huge boon for slow-esque melee units like the Avatar of Cain. We don't know for sure that the Avatar of Cain will have access to battle focus. I think it will. We've specifically been told that Wraith Guard and Wraith Lords will not have it natively, but if you have a Spirit Seer lead them, then they will have access to it. And we've been told that Wraith Knights definitely will have it. Some people are panicking that, oh no, the Avatar of Cain's a monster. Maybe monsters won't have it. I don't know. I think the Avatar of Cain probably will. All the Aspect Warriors have it, and in previous editions of the game, the Avatar has been able to do things like be lightning fast, and it would just be weird if like all the Aspect Warriors were quick and agile, and the Avatar of Cain, who is their inspiration and is better, like obviously the Avatar should be able to do the thing too. So I think it will. 2 inches of additional movement with something like the Avatar of Cain is huge. 2 inches of additional movement with like a Wraith unit, like a unit of 10 Wraiths led by a Spirit Seer, which are limited almost entirely by their mobility, is huge. Like taking their movement from a 5 to a 7 and the movement of the Spirit Seer from a 6 to an 8, like that's good. So this one's not too crazy pants, but I think that we're going to find ourselves using it as like the thing we're doing with our 4th point most turns of the game in most games. Okay, the next one is called Sudden Strike, and you use this one in the fight phase when a unit is chosen to fight, and it lets that unit make pile-in and consolidation moves of 6 inches instead of 3 inches. And this, in specific situations, can be incredibly powerful for slightly janky nonsense. 10th edition, in 9th edition, there was tremendous opportunities. There were tremendous opportunities for crazy jank with pile-in and consolidate. Less so in 10th edition because you were required to have your models finish in base-to-base contact with the enemy if they can, and they can only move if they're getting closer to the closest enemy model. But nevertheless, there's some definite jank possible here. So if you charge an enemy unit, when you make that charge roll, you have to finish in base-to-base contact if possible. In earlier editions of the game, you could like finish with an engagement, but not in base-to-base, and then pile in around the back, and like they've shut down that jank. But if you have larger melee units, like if you are running a mono Harlequin detachment and you have blocks of 10 Harlequins, the ability to pile in 6 inches with those other models is probably really going to matter. And the ability to consolidate 6 inches after you fight is potentially really good because it lets you move on to objectives. So the way consolidation works, you have to get closer to enemy models when you consolidate. You have to finish in base-to-base contact if you can, or you can move on to an objective. And so the ability to like fight something potentially kill it and then consolidate 6 inches instead of 3 inches, either into another enemy unit or onto an objective, is pretty powerful. You're not going to use it every turn. This is going to be a pretty situational one, but when you need it, potentially very powerful. The ability to like charge some chaff unit with the Avatar of Cain, kill it and not be checked by that unit, because you can just like fall forward 6 inches onto some other useful target, an objective, another unit or whatever, is potentially really, really good. The same is true of like melee wraiths. And then the last one is called Opportunity Seized. You use it when an enemy unit ends a fall back move. So if an enemy unit tries to disengage with you in combat, you can follow up D6+1 and be like, no, you, sir, are not going anywhere. The most obvious beneficiaries are units like, the dedicated melee units like Striking Scorpions or Howling Banshees or Harlequins or Wraithguard or the Avatar of Cain. Just not being able to get away from Craft Worlders in melee, it's really good. And Drukhari already have something like this, which is super powerful. And then the other time that you might use this, or you may remember I talked about using your like a Viper with that vectored engine thing to like make an aggressive move, shoot, and then just crash into an opponent's unit and be like, no, bro, you're not going anywhere. You can even use vehicle shock when you do that, right? Like I might not have very good melee, but I'm gonna move extra far, and then I'm gonna vehicle shock you, and then I'm gonna get you stuck here, and then when you try to move away, I'm gonna just like drive into you again because I'm such an annoying elf. You just cannot leave. That is potentially a sick combination, like really good. And I also really like that there's several powers here that are incentivizing melee elves a little bit more. Space elves have really been predominantly a shooting faction in 10th edition, with a few exceptions. The Avatar's really powerful, but for the most part, they've been a shooting faction. And I love melee elves. Like my favorite elves are the melee elves. So it's nice to see the new faction abilities throwing melee elves a bone, maybe a little bit more than some of the shooty elves, although that ability to fade back instead of fire and fade, to move after you've been shot, is certainly really good. But because at least a full half of these powers really are focused on melee elves, that's going to be another reason to have elves multi-class just a little bit more, because if you want to use all 4 of these, it's going to be a little hard to do that without having melee elves in your army. And there's certainly the possibility that they're going to have crazy synergy with enhancements that we haven't seen yet, stratagems that we haven't seen yet, detachment abilities that we haven't seen yet. There could be unit card abilities that interact with these, let you do some of them for free additional times, or interact with them other ways, or maybe even use your battle-focused tokens for unit-specific abilities. Who knows? But I think that this is a very interesting, potentially very potent faction ability that's going to be enormously challenging for new players, not only because it requires some like tactically sophisticated thinking and planning ahead, but just because you have to remember it. You have to keep in your head these 6 things, keep track of the number of points that you have to do the things, plan out how you're going to do them, while also doing the same with your stratagems and your command points, while also remembering what all of your stuff does and having some notion of what your opponent's stuff does. But honestly, that's kind of what it's, I think, supposed to be like to play Space Elves. It's certainly what it's been like playing Space Elves and all of the other editions for quite some time. And part of what makes Space Elves fun is you get to feel like some sort of crafty mastermind. Okay, so that's what I've got. If you have your own ideas about possible synergies or units that may especially benefit from the new battle focus ability, I hope that you'll mention those in the comments below. If you're interested in becoming a patron and talking about this more, not only with me, but also with my other patrons on my Discord, I will link the Discord or the Patreon, which gives you access. It's only $3 a month, and it's a really cool community. And lastly, even if you don't have any super clever ideas about battle focus, just saying hello is cool. It helps the algorithm. I like hearing from people. If you've not liked and subscribed, I hope that you'll do those things. And many thanks, as always, to my patrons and also wonderful sponsor, the Magnet Baron, who remains the only person from whom I buy magnets. Okay, thanks everybody. Back again soon. Really excited about the Codex dropping in less than 2 weeks, and already planning how I'm going to make that comprehensive review work. That's it for today. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.